warahmatullah. Very good morning, everyone. Okay, so today both of us will talk about alternative assessment. And, we are going to keep this light, nothing heavy, but this is just tips and ideas, and it will be more, I think, meaningful for all of us if we got into a discussion and, we have a Q&A session and two-way discussion instead of just you listening to us. Yeah. Okay, now this is basically the outline for our presentation. So I'm going to give a basic definition that most people would use as what is alternative assessment, but I will also scope in what is it we're going to talk about when we say alternative assessment during this presentation. So then we'll look at a simple guiding principle, which I'm sure is familiar to all of you, but we will just make sure that everybody is at the same level. After that, we're going to look at examples. This is our personal examples. And after that, to online principles, flip assessment, and final tips. After that, it's Q&A. Please feel free to type your questions. We can cue our discussion towards your questions if it's possible. Okay, now, basically, if you search for what is actually alternative assessment, it's also known as authentic assessment, because the purpose of alternative assessment is mainly to measure what students can do, what they cannot do, not just limited to what they know. So it has to do with really looking at what the students do. That is why it's called authentic assessment. And this is beyond the traditional closed book written exam. But even though authentic assessment is normally, it has products, it's not related to written exams, we are going to bring it wider a little bit in this presentation by also looking at the assessment such as open book written examinations. So we will include in this presentation how you can give open book exams and take home exams. And if we can actually implement alternative assessment, it will be very easily aligned to our outcomes, because we have to start with the outcomes. Okay, so how we decide to conduct the assessment must start from the outcomes. However, if you really want for it to be authentic, it may require more time and effort. Okay, so you have to balance between what the lecturers and the students are able to do and how authentic you want it to be. Okay, so there's a balancing act there. We have to remember that it's no use if something is too rigorous that it's not sustainable. Okay, so anything that we do should be sustainable. When we talk about alternative assessment, you can do it, of course, beyond the online approach. That is much, much easier. But in our situation at the moment where we cannot see our students physically, we can always see them virtually, this is even more beneficial to know how we can do alternative assessment. Authentic meaning real, real. It's like the real workplace, real world, how is it being applied?
Okay, we're going to have Mentimeter first. I think from this sharing, I think the large respondent said that case study is one of the possible alternative platform lah. Followed by online quiz, take home exam,
project.
Then there is something on the open book test, take home test. So I pass back to you on your slide.
Online quiz, Okay, boleh. Thank you for participating. So I can see that many of you have a lot of ideas on how to conduct alternative assessment. So any of your ideas fall into this? Okay, I can see projects just now. But we have actually open book test or quizzes. Can see take home exams. Okay, so these are several possible ones. And I can see a lot of variations just now. but these are some of the alternative assessments that we can conduct in our classes. Now, between us, between Dr. Tazli and I, we have conducted some of them. So we will share them with you, how you can actually do it during this time. So we are coming to the second part of the presentation. So this is the guiding principle, talking about some principles. Now, all of us are in engineering, science, or the technology-based areas. When we want to do anything in engineering or the sciences or mathematics, we always go back to the principle to guide us in how we decide on how to do things. Okay, so in education, there's a lot of principles, whereas it's more clear-cut in engineering and in sciences. There's a lot of principles in education, but one guiding principle that I think is familiar to many of us is constructive alignment. This was actually put forth by Professor John Biggs. Yeah? Basically, what constructive alignment is that whatever the outcomes or whatever our intention is for the students to get, this is very, very important, because whatever we want to design in our classes starts with our intended outcomes. In terms of the intended outcomes, from there, we have to activate the verb in our outcomes, in our teaching and learning activities. And from here, we decide on the kind of assessment that we can actually measure from the students' activities. What we always learn for engineering faculty members especially, we are very much familiar with outcome-based education. We use OBE, and also even from non-engineering, everybody's using OBE. Now, constructive alignment is very, very similar to OBE in the sense that everything must be aligned. But in constructive alignment, Professor John Biggs added the constructive in front of the alignment because constructive alignment is based on the theory of constructivism. And basically, it means that the students create their understanding or their knowledge or their ability from what they do. Okay, so students have to do whatever it is that's in our outcome verbs. So this is the slight difference between just having an alignment and having a constructive alignment. So if we want the students to be able to do something, if we have a verb in our outcome, now all our outcomes will have that. So those verbs must be acted out inside the students' teaching and learning activity. If we have designed the teaching and learning activity well, according to what the outcomes must be, then assessment is normally very, very easy, because we can just assess the students when they are actually doing whatever it is that we ask them to do in the teaching and learning activity. Now, assessment in terms of the constructivist learning theory, assessment is really important in helping the students to learn. Now, Professor John Biggs actually emphasized on assessment because he says that students will learn according to how we assess them. Okay, there's even a saying that assessment drives learning. How we assess the students inside the teaching and learning activities, whatever it is that they're doing, is really, really important, and we need to really think properly about how we do the assessment. Okay, so this is something important. Remember that assessment drives learning, and students will learn according to how we assess them. Sometimes when we ask students to do something and there's no assessment at all, so maybe you will see that it's normal to hear complaints when lecturers say that I ask the students to do something and they don't want to do it. So how we provide the assessment, how we design it, is really, really important when we want the students to do anything that we want them to do. Okay, so assessment is really, really powerful. Now, in a very well-designed, constructively aligned teaching and learning environment, assessment actually will overlap with the teaching and learning activity. Okay, and assessment is indeed very powerful for learning because students can get a lot of feedback from the assessment. In constructive alignment, formative assessment is just as important as summative assessment. The feedback that the students get from the assessment is actually more important than the marks, because this will help them to improve and this will support them in attaining the outcomes. Another point about the constructivist learning environment, sometimes we have very high level outcomes. Now, in alternative assessment, normally we want to reach the higher level outcomes. The problem is when we want to reach the higher level outcomes, sometimes it falls flat. Students are not able to get there. And, you know, when we use student-centered activities, we tend to blame it on student-centered learning techniques. When we say that students cannot reach the outcomes or they cannot perform whatever it is that we ask them to perform, such as complex problem solving, analyzing papers or reports, or analyzing certain things. Yeah. Now, I want to ask you something. If someone is standing at the ground level in front of the garage door, can a normal person reach the red door? Can anybody get to the red door?
No.
Unless you have like superpowers like Avengers, you're Spider-Man or something, then it will be quite difficult to get to the red door, right? So yes, you can fly there if you can, okay? But a normal person will not be able to get to the red door. So how can we get to that red door? Any ideas?
Put ladder.
Yes, put a ladder. Okay, very good. We can build stairs. Okay.
Climb the window.
Climb the window. I don't think I can climb the window and get there either. Okay,
Become
but
a Spider-Man.
yes. Now, this is the same with our students. When we ask them to do something that requires higher level thinking, higher level cognitive processes, so they don't have the skill, they don't have that ability. So we have to scaffold them. We have to put the stairs there. And the stairs, the steps cannot be very big, because if it's too big, then they cannot climb it. Okay, for a normal person, you need the normal type of stairs. Okay, so now there's something in education called scaffolding. Now I know that all of us know what scaffolding is, the normal thing. We see scaffolding when a building is being constructed, right? And it's there to support the concrete until it dry out, and then we take it off. So this is also the same in learning. Scaffolding for learning simply means that we provide support for the students over their zone of proximal development. Okay, so ZPD is the zone of proximal development. This is the distance between the students' individual performance and the performance with social support. So whatever kind of support that we can provide them for them to reach the outcomes, for them to do what we ask them to do to reach until the level that we want, the standard that is required. Now, if it is beyond the zone of proximal development, then students might give up because it's just too high for them. So sometimes you have to provide several different scaffolding. Okay, whatever scaffolding you want to provide. Once the students have acquired the skill, then you can remove them. You can remove the support. Now, this can be done through activities, through formative assessments, where you can give them a little mark just to motivate them to do it. But normally in the formative part, even if you want to give them marks, don't give too much because they're still trying to develop the skill. So this is just an analogy. These are the teaching and learning activities that they have to do. They're climbing the stairs. So this is several scaffolding that you have arranged for them. And at the same time, you have the assessment tasks to encourage them to climb and getting feedback on how well they are doing. When we are doing this, actually, we are also developing in them the ability to assess themselves. Okay? Being able to think about how they are doing things. If you are developing this in your students, this is called metacognitive skills. And it's really important. We rarely talk about it in engineering, in developing metacognitive skills in our students. But metacognitive skills is really important because this is the root skill to developing all the learning abilities and towards being self-directed learners, lifelong learners. Okay, now this is simply a general guideline for constructing assessments. Somebody wanted to know how to make a take-home exam. So we will talk in more detail later, but this is just a general guideline for any assessment. So define the outcome. You have to know what is the outcome. Yeah. You have to really think about and really understand what does the outcome entail. What are the components of the outcome that you have? And then you have to create the activities, and this is during your teaching and learning activity and assessment task. Create the activities that will bring out the active verb in the outcome. Whatever it is that you want to assess, make sure you can see it. It is observable. If you cannot see it, then how can we assess it? Okay. So how we want to see it, you may have to break it down even further. You will have to also decide on the standards. So if you want to decide on the standard, this will require us to develop rubrics. After that, decide on the guidance needed. So can the students reach those outcomes just in one leap? Okay. Or do you need to prepare scaffolding, or do you need to prepare a guidance so that you can communicate across to them what is the standards that are required? How can they step by step reach there? Now, after that, you try it out and then make revisions. It will be helpful if you are teaching with someone else, or if you have a friend or anybody who can give you feedback on their impression of the assessment. Okay. If you have a partner in teaching, this would be very, very helpful.
I would like to add one more thing,
Yes.
Prof. According to Professor Richard Felder, maybe some of you have been asking, like, when you develop some kind of assessment, how long that you in terms of the duration, the duration for the students, how long does they being allocated time for them to solve the problem? So according to Prof. Felder, first of all, we need to solve ourselves first, and then you multiply with 3. So there will be a good allocated time for your students. So if let's say you have open book 2 hours, then you solve it within 2 hours, then perhaps supposedly for student it's supposed to be 6 hours lah kan?
So this is for written exams, yeah?
Yeah.
So written exams, when you want to give time to your students, if you're thinking about the time to give to your students for exams, what Dr. Tazli said is very important. If we have made the question, try to do it on our own, and let's say it took us 10 minutes to solve the problem, then we have to give the students 30 minutes to do it. Okay? We will link this with online implementation in a while. So this is just general. But
bukan dia
now,
tunggu. Assalamualaikum.
ya, waalaikumsalam.
Wan Hamidun.
Ya.
Bukan tunggu jawapan student buat answer.
Tak. I think you're joking, right, Prof? Okay. Kalau tunggu jawapan student baru kau tunggu jawapan student baru nak buat dia punya answer script, dia mesti ada tertinggal data.
I attended that course by Elder tu. Masa di Johor kan, I attended that course. I exactly dengar juga macam you cakap tu lah. Kali 3 kan.
Kali 3. Sebenarnya kalau siapa yang study dekat US, profesor saya pun ada sebut masa saya study pun, masa saya undergrad pun, profesor tu dah cakap. Dia kata whatever it is, I can solve that problem 1/3 the time that you're taking. So dia nak tunjukkan yang memang benda tu fair lah, and it is doable.
Any rule of thumb, Prof, for 3 hours closed book exam to open book exam?
Okay, gini ni lagi satu tentang constructive alignment Dalam constructivist punya teori, dia kata kita kena tengok student kita. You have to know your students. Dan memang betul students kita vary Dia punya ability dia vary. Dan when we are trying to help them, of course there's always time constraint. Dan bila kita nak bandingkan giving face to face compared to exam where we give it to them online and they pass it back to us, you have to understand that students, some of them are not doing it in the most conducive environment. They don't have a specific space to study or a specific space to do their exam. Jadi I tend to give a little bit more extra time. Tapi nanti in the tips you will see at the end of this session, we have some tips we must keep in mind when it's an online exam. Okay? So one of the things is make sure they cannot Google for the answer. Itu satu lah. Okay, so in terms of the time, I will tend to give a little bit more time so that whatever environment they are facing, we do not add to their anxiety. Itu yang penting lah.